Hello film fans, and welcome to this episode of the Chameleons. Now, this week, Frozen Planet grabbed its backpack and headed off to the mountains, and I've got to say, I think this is the best episode so far, if only from the fact that it had more variety than your sort of traditional Frozen Planet episode. In fact, I found it quite difficult to sort of narrow it down to three different things to look at for this episode. But I tried my best, so here's the three things that I particularly enjoyed about this episode of Frozen Planet, together with my overall thoughts on it. And now, I mentioned at the tail end of the last episode I did on the Arctic that I was particularly looking forward to the eagle sequences in this episode, which they sort of teased in the trailer at the end of the last episode. And I've got to say, it didn't disappoint. Now, I should explain, I've always been quite fascinated by those stories you often got in old natural history books about eagles forcing deer and other ungulates over the edge of cliffs, knocking them off and then coming down to feed on them. And I always thought when I was younger, does that actually really happen? Because it kind of sounds a bit like something somebody might make up, doesn't it? Maybe they found an eagle feeding on a kill at the bottom of a cliff and assumed it knocks it off. Or maybe somebody just used their imagination a bit and thought it would make a good story. And I always thought that that was just it. It was made up. But no, on this week's episode of Frozen Planet, you actually see it happen for real. Not just once, but multiple times and in several different ways. So they're looking at golden eagles in the Alps, hunting chamois, and David Attenborough explains that the golden eagles, which have a chick to feed, have to feed it several times a day. So obviously they're looking for food a lot of the time, and they're hunting in pairs, hunting these small chamois kids, which weigh about the same as they do, and you see this amazing sequence where one of the eagles stoops down, and golden eagles are famously the second fastest animal on Earth, second only to the peregrine falcon. And so one of them creates a distraction, and the other one then zooms in and manages to grab one of the chamois kids. But obviously, being about the same size as the eagle, and probably weighing a little bit more, considering that golden eagles are also incredibly light, they find it quite difficult, obviously, to kill it, at least kill it quickly. So what they then do is they literally take it up in the air. At this point, it's still probably alive, although it's quite difficult to tell from the distance they were filming at. And then it simply drops it, and obviously that then kills it. And then they obviously come down and then bring it off to their nest, and they feed their chicks from that. And at that point, I thought that was all they were going to show you, and I thought that's pretty cool. I mean, it's not exactly forcing something off the edge of a cliff in sort of the traditional sense, but I mean, it's pretty close. You can certainly see how somebody got the idea that they might do that from seeing one drop a kid and then come down and feed on it. And then it goes on to winter time, and you're thinking, oh, hang on a minute. I thought that was the only bit of the sequence they were going to do. This looks interesting. And obviously the chamois are now grown up. They're much bigger. They're probably even bigger than the eagles. And you think, well, they can't possibly be feeding on those, can they? And then you see them they're hunting again in pairs, and they grab one of the kids. At this point, it's so big that they can't actually, wrestle it to the ground. It's literally, the eagle is almost on its back, and the chamois is still standing up. And it literally wrestles it. It doesn't so much force it off the cliff, as in kind of, the traditional sense that we might think of it swooping down and the sort of the chamois startling and sort of overbalancing. Because obviously they're chamois, they're incredibly good balancers, and they're amazing climbers, so it's not likely to happen quite like that. It literally wrestles it off the edge. It's quite remarkable, and then once it kind of builds up momentum, it then manages to pick up something which must weigh a lot more than it does, and then you can see it struggling, and then it drops it, and it's kind of it's a bit like in films when you see they drop a stuntman, and obviously it's from a distance and they've got a parachute on, but they make the stuntman flail around a little bit, and then obviously they cut away, and the stuntman then lets go of their parachute, and then obviously they land safely. But it looks a little bit like that, except of course the chamois doesn't land safely, it dies. And it's absolutely an amazing sequence. It's filmed really well. A lot of the shots are from quite a long distance away, but not as distant as I was expecting. They did a really good job of sort of getting some of it in close up, so you can quite clearly see what's going on. There was a famous sequence they filmed for, I think it was for Planet Earth, if I remember rightly. I think it was Planet Earth, which had golden eagles hunting reindeer, I think it was in Russia. And they did actually manage to film a shot from a long way away of one of these golden eagles catching a reindeer calf in very similar circumstances. I don't think it dropped it off a cliff, but it sort of wrestled it to the ground and killed it. But it was from such a long way away, they didn't show it in the actual proper Planet Earth. They showed it in clips on the BBC website. but basically it wasn't good enough quality for them to show it in the proper documentary series. So I was really pleased that actually this looks quite good. You know, it's a little bit distant. You can probably tell that the cameraman was a long way away using like a telephoto lens, but it's not blurry. It's quite clear. You can clearly see what's going on. The other sequence I was particularly almost amazed by was the sequence it showed you with the chameleons in the mountains. I think it was in Africa, although it wasn't that specific. And these chameleons, obviously, they are surviving at incredibly high altitudes for reptiles. Obviously, reptiles are cold-blooded, as I'm sure you know, and they have to basically allow the sort of external temperature to heat them up in the morning rather than generate their own body heat. So you had these quite incredible scenes of these chameleons basically frozen to the branches, hunting, and then gradually letting the sun warm them up so they can start to move. And then they showed this amazing sequence of this female chameleon giving birth. Now, obviously, most reptiles, generally speaking, lay eggs. Not all of them, obviously, but most of them do. But obviously, if you lay eggs at that kind of altitude, they're going to very quickly freeze, and the eggs then will crack and they'll die. So the egg laying isn't really, you know, a kind of viable alternative. So they give birth to these live young in absolutely incredible sequences, and they will come out all sort of covered obviously in sort of the embryonic fluid, and it looks absolutely amazing. And it's very clever how they very quickly sort of adapt to their surroundings, and they sort of clean themselves off. And you see them hunting. There was a brilliant sequence I really liked where one of the baby chameleons, it catches a grasshopper, which is about the same size as it, well, certainly about half the size of it anyway, and it grabs it. And obviously when an adult chameleon grabs an insect, their tongue goes all wonk, and it grabs it, and then it pulls it back in, and it eats it. But when this chameleon's tongue went zunk, it tried to drag it back and literally pulled itself instead. It was that sort of such a sort of a size difference between the prey and it. It actually pulled itself closer, although it ultimately sort of grabbed it, so it still worked. But I thought it was kind of amusing. But then the best bit of it is probably when they then have to go and hide at night, because obviously it gets very cold, and so they have to hide in the foliage where it's slightly warmer and they're slightly more protected from the frost. And obviously when then the freezing temperatures come, they're safe until morning. So that was really nice. I really enjoyed that bit. And then I think my other favourite sequence, there's so many really good sequences. I was tempted to talk about the sequence with the pumas. That was a really good sequence where you see two female pumas sharing a kill in the dead of night with, you know, the latest starlight camera technology. There was another sequence with the flamingos, baby flamingos getting frozen in this lake in the Andes. That was quite exciting and tense. But I think the sequence I really enjoyed most was the one with the keas. Now, keas, I don't know if you've heard of them, that they're New Zealand parrots, and they're one of the few carnivorous parrots in the world. I mean, there's some brilliant footage in, I think it's The Life of Birds, which shows you keas hunting rabbits in New Zealand. Basically, they stick their heads down the rabbit burrows and grab them, pull the oh no, it wasn't rabbits. Sorry, it was rabbit burrows, but they're hunting baby shearwaters. So they grab them, pull them out, and then kill them. Keas have quite nasty, wicked-looking beaks, even by parrot standards. And obviously, growing up in an environment where there's obviously not a lot of food, they've adapted to eating meat. And most parrots obviously live in tropical surroundings where food is much more readily available to come by. So it's not surprising that obviously keas have adapted to the harsher environment. But keas are amazing because they're incredibly intelligent. I mean, I remember reading once that when they keep keas in captivity, they really have to give them stuff to do, because if they don't, they just go, you know, mad with boredom. And parrots generally need a lot of attention, but keas particularly do. They're so active in their brains that they literally will get bored if you don't do anything, even with other keas to sort of interact with. And the keas in this are fantastic. You see them sort of socializing around a dead goat, of which they feed on, and you see them playing with each other. And what I didn't realise before is they're quite a drab, kind of greeny brown colour, unlike most parrots, obviously. But what's really cool is when they open their wings and obviously they're playing together, you see they've got these like red flashes underneath their wings, sort of kind of where your armpits would be if they were humans. And that was really, really cool. I really enjoyed that. And obviously just to see carnivorous parrots in general, and quite social carnivorous parrots at that, is quite exciting. You don't see keas a lot in most documentaries. They do make the most annoying noise, I think, of any animal. I mean, well, actually no. This episode in particular has two really irritating noises. It has the noise made by the guanacos, and then it has the noise made by the keas. And I'm not sure which is more irritating. I think probably the guanacos just take it. Guanacos, if you don't know, are like the llamas which the pumas were hunting. But the Kia noise is quite irritating as well. It's supposed to sound like Kia, that's where they get their name from, but I've got to say the New Zealanders must have quite an active imagination, because they don't sound that much like Kia. It sounds more like and they make it all the time. It must be really annoying if you live in New Zealand. But yeah, I really enjoyed this episode overall. I think it's probably the best one we've had, as I said at the beginning. It had some beautiful shots as well. Again, the score was fantastic, very Hans Zimmer, particularly in the scene with the puma hunting and also with the avalanches, which were absolutely brilliantly shot. They apparently used a special type of very fast-moving racer drone to basically sort of film alongside an avalanche, which was absolutely amazing, and it looks fantastic. And they don't spend too much time on it either, so you just have enough time to sort of marvel at the sort of visual beauty of the sequence without getting bored by the fact they're showing you yet another, you know, sequence of shots of snow falling down a cliff. So yeah, overall, I think this is probably the best episode, especially as it kind of focuses on stuff that most other episodes of Frozen Planet don't do. So far, Frozen Planet has sort of been quite focused on the kind of the Arctic and the Antarctic, and the next episode is also on the Antarctic, so it'll be interesting to see where the series goes after that. But yeah, overall, I've really enjoyed this particular episode. I think it's my favourite so far. So yeah, that was my review of episode 3 of Frozen Planet 2. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have, consider subscribing to the channel. Also, you can now follow me on Twitter. My Twitter handle, if you like, is in the description below this video. So if you want to check that out, you'll be very welcome. But yeah, that was the Sherlockian. Thanks very much for watching, film fans, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.